Don, before I call us to order, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind Amy, I think I'm going to need to share my screen at some point. I'm not really sure how to do that.
Just
Okay.
let me know when and I'll give you presenter
Okay,
privileges. Okay.
yeah,
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the April 12th, 2024 meeting of the Legislative Study Commission for the environmental and health effects of poly and perfluorinated compounds. And the meeting is called to order at about, there's Mr. Strand, at 2:07 p.m. So first order of business is approval of the minutes of the March 8th, 2024 meeting. Any comments on the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion.
So
I
moved.
move. Second.
I saw Ron's hand, so. And who would like to be officially known as the second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Rosemary. Any comments on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And Rich LaSalle, if you will say, if you can hear me. Okay, I take that as a yes. So that passes unanimously. Thank you. Our next order of business is an update from Don Preventure on the MVD system. So very valuable information on the persistence in our groundwater and drinking water in Merrimack.
right. Okay, let me see here. Not sure which screen I'm showing. Let me see.
While Dawn's doing that, I got a message from Representative Murphy. She's trying to join it. She's having computer problems. So we can expect her to join soon.
Okay, thank you.
What am I doing here?
Don, we are seeing the screen with the internet that has the connected to GoToWebinar.
Yeah, so let me try to find, that's the one I want to do. You guys see like a map of Merrimack now? Good.
Yes.
That's what you're supposed to see. That's good. All right, so just a little bit of orientation here. You're probably pretty familiar with exit 11 here in Merrimack. Just for orientation, two of our wells, well 2 and 9, this is an old one. Well 1 is no longer in service, but well 9 is one of our newest wells. It's not even on this map yet. It's right next to well 2. That's sort of in the center part of the town here. We've got 2 other wells in this area, wells 4 and 5. That's up in the northeast corner of town, and that's closer to the St. Gobain facility in this area here. And then the last pair of wells that we have is all the way down here, actually in the town of Hollis, and that serves water into the Merrimack system as well. I just wanted to put this map out here so you get an orientation there. The first thing I wanted to mention is that MVD has received 2 grants in 2023, each of them for $1.5 million. And that was through working with the DES, and Amy's very familiar with those grants. It was for extending water mains in 3 different areas. So the one project, and this is covering Farmer, Mason, and Foster Road. If you can see that over here, which is off of Amherst Road. That's $1.5 million of water main that's going to go in. It's going to make like this loop over here. And those funds were non-American Recovery Plan Act, the $1.5 million. There were 2 grants, so that was one of them. There you can see some of the lots in this area. I don't have the well locations and PFOA values on here, but my recollection, there were probably somewhere between 8 and 10 wells, private wells in these lots that exceeded the 12 PFOA limit. So we're just going to extend this, connect the water main to Amherst Road, loop it through here and bring it back. This little Fuller Mill Road, there's not a lot of properties on here, so we didn't really have a need to extend the main there. So that's one of the $1.5 million grants. Again, going back down here off Amherst Road, going down Natticook Road, the second of the 2 grants for $1.5 million. We're going to be running lines down Paul Mary, which is a cul-de-sac, and then another T off of that to the end of Girard Drive. And again, down here, these wells, private wells, exhibited contamination, PFOA over the 12 part per trillion limit. And this is quite a bit smaller of a project. So the $1.5 million, that was covered by ARPA funds, American Recovery Plan Act. But these 2 little segments here, we don't think are going to add up to the $1.5 million. So the last location that we are also running a water main extension is off of Turkey Hill Road, which is, I'm sorry, McQuestion Road. This is where it changes, Turkey Hill changes here. It's going to be coming off of McQuestion Road, going down Wilson Hill Road for a short distance. And then we're going to run it up Mulliken Road, which is a new cul-de-sac there. And there are some lots in this area which also had elevated PFOA for private wells. So we're going to pick up those properties as service connections as well. So those are the $2.5 million grants that MVD received in 2023. So right now, all the surveys have been done, the land surveys. Underwood Engineers is designing the water main, the design plans for the water main. And we hope to send those out to bid in the summer and get the system constructed late summer or in the fall. I think that's the time frame that we're looking at. So the next thing I just wanted to share with you is some of the PFAS results from our distribution system. Let me see here. How did I get back to this before? Not my webcam. I'm not used to using this interface, so it's a little challenging. Where are we here? Ah, yes. So this is what I wanted to show. So now you should be looking at a table of numbers, PFAS results in the distribution system. Does everybody see that?
Yes.
Good. So what we've done is basically on a quarterly basis, we've been taking samples in the distribution system, in the MVD distribution system. Of course, the phone needs to ring now. So what we sampled here was the Pennachuck booster. And this is where the Pennachuck Nashua system, we have an interconnection with the Merrimack Village District system. And as you can see, we don't have data at all from 2023 because we didn't turn on that water system for the entirety of last year, essentially, because we didn't need any makeup water. It was plenty of rain to keep up with the demand. So we didn't need to give us a call again. Open up that. So the point I wanted to show here is that PFOA is prevalent, is detected in the Nashua core system. At least it was through 2022 anyways. And, you know, down here, you're looking at, you know, anywhere from 11 to somewhere around 10 or somewhere in that vicinity. I think they're doing more treatment now, changing out. I think they've got carbon in their sand beds, so that number might be a little bit lower. My recollection was it's in the low single digits of PFOA. So that's just showing you what we're getting if we do open up the connection from Nashua. So now we're talking about in the core MVD system on Winchester Drive. You can see back around in it was in March of 2023, the last treatment plant went online for wells 2 and 9. And from that point forward, you can see a precipitous drop with all these non-detectable results here. And I'm showing all of the PFAS, there's 25 of the PFAS compounds in here that I'm showing. And, you know, pretty consistently, the PFOA has been certainly non-detect since that treatment plant went online. But we do see a little bit of leakage occasionally with the PFBA, and of course that's a short chain compound that breaks through the filters first. So MVD instituted a policy where when we see breakthrough through the lead vessel in any of our treatment plants, breakthrough of any PFAS, which is typically PFBA is the first one to break through, we have a plan to institute removal of the carbon in that lead vessel and replacement with new carbon. And that is anytime within 8 months after we've replaced the carbon in that vessel. So if it breaks through in 4 months, we're going to let it go for another 4 months till we get to 8 months, and we change it out at 8 months. If it goes longer than 8 months, we'll leave it there and we won't change it out. It was sort of a compromise so that we can maintain the budget that we had developed for MVD. At the same time, we're changing it far sooner than we need to for regulatory compliance. The 4 parameters for regulatory compliance since that last treatment plant went online have never broken through into the drinking water. So we do have on occasion these 2, PFBA and PFPEA, are the ones that occasionally will break through between the time that we have to change out those carbon vessels. So that's West Winchester Drive on Society Hill, which is sort of in the northeast corner region of Merrimack. Again, ever since April back, you know, the treatment plant went online March of 23. We've got consistent non-detect of all PFAS compounds in the northeast part of the distribution system at Society Hill. Smith Road, that's sort of more central along DW Highway. And again, you see some of the small detections of PFBA here, everything else being non-detect. That's sort of the kind of similar pattern you're going to find here. This is at Bedford Road. Again, this is back, the last time we had any detections there was before March of 23. So since March of 23, we've got consistently non-detect in the distribution system at Bedford Road. Parker Drive, same thing, starting in April of last year, consistent non-detect. Turkey Hill Road, same situation there. Hutchinson Road, which is off of Natticook Road next to one of our water tanks, same situation there, consistently non-detectable. And then Continental Boulevard, again, we got some slight breakthrough. There was a number here that I'm not sure made a lot of sense, the 6.2 FTS. I don't think we even detected that in our raw water, so I'm not sure that that's a valid sample, just could be a bad sample or something. But again, I think it's showing the same pattern of, you know, fairly consistent non-detect. So now I'm just showing you some of the graphs. We also graph, basically on a monthly basis, we graph the PFAS of the raw water in all of our 6 wells. So this is looking back at MVD2, and this data goes all the way back to 2016 when the PFAS issue first came to light. So you can kind of see the numbers are rolling around here. And the pattern I've noticed in the last 3 years anyway is these are from one grid line to the next is a full year. So this is actually the year 2023, 2022 here, and 2021. When you get towards the late fall, early winter, that seems to be the peak of when we're seeing PFOA at its maximum. I'm not really sure why that is. It even occurred in 2023. So I thought it would have been due, typically in the fall, you don't have a lot of recharge. So I thought I would have seen a drop with all of the precipitation we had last year. but that's not necessarily the case. So it's a strange phenomenon. I really don't know how to explain it, but these last 3 years on this well, maybe it's just coincidental, I'm not sure, but we did see a maximum there for PFOA. PFOA has always been higher. It's always been the single PFAS that's been out of compliance. The remaining 3 PFAS in New Hampshire, regulated in New Hampshire, I don't believe have ever been violated. So it's just the PFOA. And the red dots over here, you can see is PFOS, and that's been pretty consistently below the MCL. And these 2 red black lines over here, 15 is the MCL for PFOS, 12 is the MCL for PFOA. So you can see that these blue values do exceed the MCL. They come down below the MCL occasionally as well, so it's kind of bouncing right around that level. Next are 2 other compounds, PFNA, PFHXS for well 2. And as I said, those aren't really ever in violation. Those are pretty consistently below the MCLs. The next well is well 9. There's not as much data there because that's our newest well. That just went online back in March of 23. So we were very encouraged because during the pump test in the first sample, it was essentially non-detect. The next couple of samples went all the way up to 30. And then since then, which was around, looks like about August of 23, it's been on a steady climb downward. So again, it's almost, looks like it's very low single digits here as recently as just this year. I think it was sampled in February, if I'm not mistaken. So these are the latest results that we have, and those are below the MCLs. So I really don't know how to explain that either. Well 9, again, the PFNA, PFHXS is below, typically below the standards there. The next 2 wells are going to show wells 4 and 5. Those are the ones that are closest to Saint-Gobain. Those are the ones that MVD has the settlement agreement with Saint-Gobain to construct the PFAS treatment plant that was built and I think went online in 2021. Actually, it looks like in 2020 because it was offline from 2016 through 2020. It went online in the end of 2020. So again, this is all the raw water. We're up between 70 to 90 parts per trillion here for PFOA. And again, PFOS, not even really in violation. It's really just the PFOA. Looking at the other 2 compounds, you do have a little bit more PFHXS over here, but that's still below the MCL as well. But being closer to the source, you're going to have higher raw water values there. Well 5 again is a pair with well 4. We're getting the same results, a little bit lower. PFOA between 40 and 60 essentially. PFOS again, very, very low. Same thing with the other compounds, very low. And then the last 2 wells we have, which are over in Hollis, pretty consistently here. You got a little bit of fluctuation here, but it's typically running between 20 and about 35 ppt of PFOA. And again, PFOS not above the MCL. Same thing with PFNA, PFHXS, below the limits, well below the limits. And then well 8, again, pretty consistently PFOA over the MCL. I don't see really any trends here looking at these other wells. You do see a little bit of elevation towards the end of the year, but you also see them in the middle. So it seems to be something that we're only seeing in well 2 with the end of the year increase. But so that's really what I wanted to kind of show everybody. I don't know if you have any other questions on any of this, and if you do, I can certainly answer. Go ahead, Laureen.
A couple of questions. One is, as you know, we have the PFCAs primarily, right, in our water after PFOA, the C3s to C6s that you see, the 4 or 5 of them that follow PFOA. So I think we're at a weird place right now. We are at a place where we have these like big gaps between, we have the regulations, they're moving along nationally, which is great. then we have the data that we have, and then we have our exposure and our exposure history. So my concern is, I appreciate what you've done, with the commissioners, that you are paying attention to those shorter chain, because we know from 2015 on, PFOA was changed and the PTFE was changed. So not just here, but across the nation, what we're looking at, what's coming into the regulation lists, and even what looks like could be in the CERCLA list, are primarily PFSAs. But here we have PFCAs is a big chunk of our exposure that really isn't on the radar officially anywhere. We know it's there. It's not the only place, it's in other places too, and it's everywhere. So I just want to put that out there, that I don't know what we can do about that. That bothers me. So maybe that's just a comment. And number two is, I love how we're expanding the water lines. I heard, from different people who, had just, were asking about, should they do it, should they not do it? So I'm trying to plug the professional water management you're doing with all. Off South Wabusick Lake Road, there is an area there. I don't know if you have a main on South Wabusick Lake Road, but we have a lot of homes in the BB Lane, Trowbridge Ride, and I don't know on the other end in Four Seasons. That data is not at the front of my mind. That will be a good area maybe to focus on in the future. And my question is Pennachuck. So Pennachuck knows their data. We know Pennachuck's data. What's bothered me is we have spent immense time and resources doing what we've done here in Merrimack, not only because it's the right thing to do, it's also because we have a whole town who knows. We've had decades of exposure. We see the impacts to our health. They don't have to be officially verified for us. We know it's there. That's why the commissioners are doing what they're doing. So when we bring Pennachuck water into our system, because we're short, we are bringing PFAS in. We are at that point out of compliance with the new national standards, which haven't been implemented yet. So I'm wondering, we have to start talking about that. Is there something we can do before New Hampshire really gets through the nuts and bolts of enacting those standards? Is an interim safety almost a good neighbor agreement? Is that really pie in the sky? We put time, money, resources into this, and it doesn't seem right that we should be adding PFAS into the system. Yes, we need water, and then we are at exposure again that exceeds, well, the HA right now is basically zero, right? But exceeds the federal advisories. So any thoughts from anyone over what we can do? Because, if the state decides, oh, everybody has, 2 or 3 years to test and 2 or 3 years more to comply, we can't do this for 5 years. I think in this area, there's exceptions, whatever the state is going to do and whatever they have to do, they know their job. I'm not going to get into that, but there are little pieces in this area that we almost seem to want to be granted some sort of exception, like an emergency ruling, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, to say, hey, let's go ahead and apply some of that knowledge here and see what we can do, because the goal all along is to stop our exposure. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Dawn. Have you talked with Pennachuck? I don't know what anybody's thoughts are on this, but it's huge. Even in the consent decree area, we have 1,100 wells that we know test between 4 and 12. It doesn't seem responsible to say, we'll wait till the state, decides how long it takes to go through. They have to do all that bureaucratic stuff. I don't know what they have to do to implement that. It doesn't happen on Monday. I know that, but it feels like we need to start discussing and saying, well, what can we do a little more creatively to protect people in this greater Merrimack area, to do the right thing, and maybe do some talking with Pennachuck, which, may be very naive. So that's the concern that I have. So what are your thoughts? I'm going to just mute. That's enough from me.
Yeah, so we did discuss this. Underwood has been discussing what Pennachuck is offering or planning to do to address these new MCLs. And my understanding is that I think what they're intending on doing, and maybe Mr. Wimsatt has more information than I do. I don't know. But a few months ago we had talked about that, and the thought was Pennachuck is planning on changing out their carbon in their sand beds at a more frequent basis was the way that they were intending on addressing that. So the way they have a surface water withdrawal out of the Merrimack River, and they used to take it out of Pennachuck Brook. The Pennachuck Brook PFOA level is higher. I think it's in the 40s, whereas the Merrimack River is in maybe the mid single digits. So by using Merrimack River water, it extends the life of their carbon. So what they do is they have open sand beds that the water just kind of flows by gravity. And instead of having that whole thickness of sand beds be sand, my understanding is that they've used some carbon instead of, or along with the sand, and the purpose of the carbon is to remove the PFOA or the PFAS in general. So because we asked that question, because we did enter, we have a 3-year wholesale agreement, which we're about a year into that with Pennachuck right now. And it's a small amount of water. It's on average 250,000 gallons a day. That's small because in the summer, our demand goes up to 5 million gallons in a day. We can use up to 500,000 gallons a day from Pennachuck if we want to. So when you look at that, that's basically what, 1/10 of our demand that we can that's the maximum we can get from Pennachuck. And we're only going to use it when we need it. We haven't used it the entirety of 2023 because we didn't need it. And we didn't want to use it. There's a flat rate we're paying on top of a consumption fee. So we've paid that flat rate fee as sort of an insurance policy so that we have backup water available if we need it. But we didn't really use any of the water last year, and we don't intend on using the water unless we need it because our system can't keep up, or God forbid, one or more of our wells goes down and then we're going to need it. Then that's why we're going to use it. But as far as, I'm not sure if Pennachuck has any more long range plans to meet the 4 PPT MCL for PFOA or not. But the last we knew, it was already in their system in the low single digits. I'm not sure if it was below 4 or above 4. We haven't even measured it for quite a while now coming through our system because we haven't turned on that system. But at those low levels, again, obviously it's going to blend in the MVD system with non-detect, but that doesn't mean that it's not there. It's still there. It just may not be detectable. But that's the best we have in play right now for dealing with that question. And I'm not sure if Pennachuck intends on improving or adding to their PFAS treatment. But hopefully if they do, then that would give us an opportunity to have to maybe utilize their water more. So our wholesale agreement, we've got 2 more years on that. The idea was to try and plan to see if we can get a new source online in Merrimack, whether it's artificial recharge or Mitchell Woods. We're doing cost evaluations on those, but those are coming in so high. And for the amount of water that we're going to get, I mean, artificial recharge is going to be like $7 million just to increase the capacity at wells 4 and 5 by like 20%. So I just don't know if it makes sense to put that kind of money there. So we're kind of in this interim position right now. If everything goes well and we don't have a significant drought, we can maintain with our wells in Merrimack through the summer. We've done it before. And that's what we're hoping to do. Again, we're only going to be using this as an emergency type situation in a drought, or if some of our wells go down and we need to augment the water. So I don't know if that answers all your question, but that's where we're at.
Other
I just
questions?
wanted to point out the Pennachuck booster is down in this area, right? It's the southernmost, where Continental meets 101A, basically.
Okay. Mindy, go ahead.
Thanks, Don. This is amazing data that you're presenting. I have a couple of questions. So can you show me again where well 2 is with respect to the plant St. Cobain. And then,
Well 2
what's
is
the depth of that again? The screen interval of that.
yeah, so well 2, and there are 2 wells, well 2 and well 9, and well 9 is very deep. That screen is down, I want to say it's about 80 feet deep, whereas well 2, I believe, is only about 35 feet deep. So it's likely that the water, the age of the water at well 9 is older than well 2, and maybe we just haven't pulled the upper
Yeah.
aquifer down into that stratum yet. But it was funny
That's what I
because
was kind of getting at.
we did have a very low number at first. It spiked up there and then it came back down, as I showed you at well 9. So it's kind of strange that that would happen, but I really don't have any explanation for that. But so the distance from St. Cobain, if you're asking that, again, well 2 and 9 is kind of like level with exit 11 over here, and St. Cobain is up sort of more in this northern portion of the town.
So
kind
it's
of up in the
southwest.
area.
It's southwest of the plant.
It's southwest of the plant.
Interesting. Yeah. So, and then what's the water level typically around MW2 also? Is it above the screen? Probably a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. Just wondering, like, if there's some sort of seasonal, so it might be, water level fluctuation, but it also could be, like you said, the age, or it also could be that there's some seasonal variation in what the plant was doing that could affect, I don't know. That was just like a few of the ideas I had. And then a couple more questions to follow on are, the detection limits have remained pretty consistent over the last several years, right, for the PFAS that you're analyzing for? And then have you ever done a broader look at the, I think you have, I remember you talking about it before, like have you done the 49 or whatever list? And then, yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
we did do that. I want to say it was like 70 panel of PFAS, and that was through a grant also offered through DES. And I think Brandon Kernan was involved with that, and he kind of spearheaded that. And there was another oh geez, I don't remember what it is now. PFPH.
Yeah. I remember. Yep.
It was an obscure thing, and then we weren't really sure if it was a true detection or not, because there was the lab method for that compound was different than some other compounds, so they weren't really sure if it was real. But yeah, I do recollect that. I think that was probably 2 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. And the detection limit has remained pretty consistent in your results over the past couple of
Yeah,
years?
so what I'm seeing is I think they're at about a half a part per trillion now, at least
Okay, cool.
for PFOA that I'm aware of. And
Okay.
PFBA is pretty low as well. So yeah, so those non-detects are, those are really low numbers. It's
Yeah.
not like the detection limits are 5 or 10 and we're below that. That's not the case.
Good. Yeah.
I think
okay,
all the
good.
detection limits are below 1 PPT.
Okay. And my last question was, you said, I think I heard you say that you're changing out the carbon, which is great. I think you said you're changing out the leading
Right.
vessel, and wondered if you'd ever thought about rotating the vessels instead and putting the new one on the polish and then moving the polished one to try to preserve the life a little bit more.
Yeah, so we do swap them if that's what you're talking
Oh,
about.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the present lead vessel, the media gets changed out and then it becomes the lag vessel, so
Got
that the other vessel that already had a bit of leakage come through it is now the lead vessel. So that's definitely
That's what I was
we're
asking. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Sure.
Other questions for Don? If not, I've got a quick, simple one, and then maybe not so simple. Don, what's the brown area on your map? Is that what we think the aquifer area is for 4 and 5?
Are you talking about this area here, yellowish kind of, or?
Other side by the, yes. Well, I can't see your cursor now. By the river with that little.
Oh, right in here?
kidney shaped thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is an old map, which is actually not accurate anymore, but this boundary was the aquifer, the wellhead protection area that supplies water to the wells over here, wells 4 and 5. We also have, there was another one shown, actually, I don't think it's shown on here, but we've got other maps that show the wellhead protection areas for each pair. We have 3 pairs of wells, 4 and 5, 2 and 9, 7 and 8. And each of those pairs has a wellhead protection area associated with it. This green line here is just a division between 2 pressure systems because the elevations near the river are lower, the elevations further back to the west are higher. So there's a pump station that pumps the water into that upper distribution system. And that's what this green line, it separates the 2 systems basically.
And so is St. Gobain in that well 4 and 5 wellhead protection area?
I don't believe they are. I believe,
A little bit north of it?
actually, I think they are. I think they're in this area here, somewhere in this area. But I will say, as far as I remember, the new wellhead protection area, I believe, excludes their property. So this line got pulled in a little tighter, a little closer to the wellheads. This is what the town uses for an aquifer protection district. It used to be coincidental with the wellhead protection area, but we redelineated the wellhead protection area. This was back a while before I was on the board. There was a redelineation of that with a new pump test that was done, and it shrank a little bit smaller than what you see here. So that's where we're left with. But yeah, this is kind of an older map, probably about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay, and different subject with another year of O&M experience.
Yeah.
What's that?
So actually, funny you say that. It was very painful. We were working with one company called Evoqua, and they're a very big conglomerate. They supply a lot of carbon. We had some very significant challenges in getting them scheduled to come out and change out the media. There are always delays. The first time you change it out, you have to do this chemistry profile. And then from that point on, they'll come out and that won't hold up things anymore. But it was very challenging. So just towards the second half of last year, our superintendent, Ron Miner, went to a different company. I can't remember their name right now, but they've been a pleasure to work with. So what they do is they come in and they will suck the media out of the lead vessel. And at that point, we're running on one vessel for a short period of time. They take that media, they load it in new tanker trucks, bring it over to a facility, which I think is in New York or Pennsylvania. It's thermally regenerated. And the PFAS, from what I understand, is destructed thermally. And then that carbon is reloaded back into a tanker truck and delivered back and slurried back into the vessel at the treatment plant. And this new company was able to turn those around between a week and 2 weeks. Whereas Evoqua was we were left with one tank online for, I think, about a month and a half at one of our treatment plants. So we're working out the bugs on the O&M, and that's what's going on in the industry right now is, there's a lot of challenges in trying to get the product. It's probably going to get worse, to be honest, with the prevalence of these MCLs, right? Because now you're going to pull in a lot of new sites that are going to need treatment. But I think us being in the queue like this and working with a company that works well and having repeat business it's going to make things running a lot smoother. The last 3 changes we did with this new company were markedly different than the previous company. So things are going a lot better in that respect. So that's good to know.
And has the cost been fairly stable?
Yeah, actually the cost was a little bit less. So the regeneration is a lot less money than buying virgin carbon. So that's why we're regenerating it. It's probably less than half the cost of buying virgin carbon. And you can reuse that. You lose about 10 or 15% of the volume. So you have to buy new makeup virgin carbon to make up for the 10 or 15% that's lost. But even with that, the cost has been, the cost of the regeneration has been significantly less with this new company as compared to the old company. So that's working pretty well. And I don't know if I mentioned it before, but each of our treatment plants, we have test columns built into the treatment plants on the wall. There's 6 columns in there. And what we're going to be doing is we're working with Underwood right now to test 6 different kinds of carbon and resins to see if those perform better than the carbon that we have now. So now we're in the optimization phase, right? With the O&M on the change out, we're looking to see if there's any better carbon or any better resin that works than the material that we have. So we're looking at probably doing a pilot test over the summer at one of our treatment plants to see if there's a better product out there that works better than what we're seeing now. So that's definitely in the optimization phase.
Good to hear.
And I think we got a grant from EPA on that, which is going to cover all of the testing of the PFAS, which is pretty significant. When you get 6 columns, we're probably going to be doing like monthly testing. These are $250+ a sample. So that we're always looking for all the grant money we can. And Amy will tell you that she's probably talking to Ron or Jill at least on a weekly basis. We've got so many grants going on through DES right now that we're really thankful for that. So it's working very well. And that includes road salt, watershed plans, and all kinds of other things, even beyond the PFAS issues.
I have one quick question. Going back to the well data that you were showing, you mentioned that you're seeing SAS and PFCAs at lower levels, and that might correspond with the changes to the chemicals going back 5 to 7 years. Do you anticipate that you would see those levels grow or like sort of aggregate over time, where you see a higher baseline of that as time progresses that they have been used?
Yeah, so if those compounds, the short chains, if they break down from the longer compounds, I think that's going to be a continual steady state condition. Some of the wells, we're actually seeing a little bit of a climb in PFOA levels. So I'm thinking, if you think about how this was deposited, if it's an aerial deposition, it's got to go through the soil before it hits the groundwater. So, and I've always wondered this, I've asked this question as well, is where is that contamination front? It's moving down through the soil. Obviously, some of it's staying retarded to the soil, but in bulk, it's mostly moving down through the soil. I just don't know if it's going to all of a sudden hit the water table kind of all coincidentally and cause a spike. Things seem to be pretty steady. If anything, there may be a mild uptrend in some of the wells. But I really don't know about the breakdown into the short chains. Some of those short chains may have been deposited because they were used in the raw product. I'm not really sure when the change was made to move away from PFOA to something less. So maybe those short chains have their own moving front down through the soil before it hits the water table. But the good news is whatever happens here, we've got the treatment in place. If we may end up having to change out the media more frequently, if the raw water contamination increases, then it'll consume the carbon faster. So I'm not really sure, how that's going to play out, unfortunately.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Don? Nancy, did you have your hand up? No? Okay.
Oh, I do.
Rosemary, go ahead.
Yeah, I just to tag on to what Don said, it's really tough to make assumptions on the rate of travel of different PFAS through soil, because they may find that they absorb on certain soils than others. You know, I just want to caution, I tried to get into this subject a few years ago, and it's really difficult to be able to predict the travel of PFAS through soil, to understand if we can get some historical information on when it was deposited or to what extent. I just wanted to add that as a precautionary note.
Yeah, I think you're right. Usually when you're looking at a site that's contaminated, it's a lot smaller than, you know, the vastness of this. And you can make some generalities across that site itself.
Right.
When you start getting into different topography and different soil types, it varies throughout those different situations. So it's kind of really hard to apply a general hypothesis across the entire boundary. So that's
exactly.
kind of,
Yeah.
Any more questions for Don? Go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you, Chris. I'm just wondering if I thought that I heard that what we're saying is that Saint-Gobain did formerly sit in an aquifer protection zone, which was somehow then remapped and the boundary now excluded them. I would like to get some more information about that, because I'm not clear about how or why that happened or what precipitated it.
Yeah, so and this was before I was on the board, so it's a little foggy, but my understanding is that wells 4 and 5 were pumped in a formal pump test, and I'm not exactly sure when the date was. It was definitely predated 2016. I think it even predated 2014, to be honest with you. And I'm not sure why that happened. Maybe the wells never had a formal pump test. I mean, these wells are the oldest ones that really exist in the MVD system here. So there was a pump test done originally. It was by Emery and Garrett, who we're still using now. And when you do a pump test, you put monitoring wells out a distance away. And at a certain point, you don't see any drawdown in those monitoring wells. So that tells you that you're beyond the area of recharge to the production well. So you kind of delineate a boundary in there. And the boundary that they delineated was smaller than this kidney-shaped thing that you're seeing here on the screen. This was developed probably not based on a pump test. It was probably based more on topography or soil type or something like that. So this is an older boundary that was delineated, and it was subsequently updated. Like I said, I want to say it was probably back in like 2012 or somewhere in that neighborhood. It definitely predated all of the concern about the PFAS issue in this area. So I'd have to look into it more to give you more detailed information on that.
Thanks,
I was
Don.
only on the board since 2018, so it would be all history to me that I'd have to research and look into as well.
Mindy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask if, I know it might be hard for you, Don, or not. I don't know if DES has it, or if somehow the commission could get a hold of the pump test.
Yeah, I'm sure we have a copy of it, definitely.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Don. Always great data that you present. We have Mike next, but just sort of as a segue, Mike, I know Jeff Martz had emailed Laureen and myself around last June that there was going to be a study that was going to get kicked off on leachability or leaching of PFAS through soils. And so sometime in your presentation, if you could say something about that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I can start by saying, I mean, that all of that work was done to support our efforts to establish soil remediation standards, and that work happened over the course of almost 2 years, and that culminated this past fall with us developing proposed soil standards for rulemaking, which are trying to remember where they're at. They're in the point now where I think they're probably over at the Office of Legislative Services, and there will be a rulemaking notice published and a public hearing on those. So that work has been completed, and it informed us developing leaching-based soil standards for cleanup of soil. So I hope that's helpful. So, and certainly at a future meeting, we could talk more about that if that would be of interest to the group.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, thank you.
All right, do you want me to begin my update?
Yes, please.
Okay, happy to do that. So good afternoon, everybody. So the DES update, I will follow the same format as usual. As far as there's no specific updates from the Air Division for this month. I usually start by talking about the facility closure for our Waste Division update, and there are really no changes on that. They have, my understanding is that they've completed manufacturing operations, at least any operations that involve coating at the site. And then there are still some, last I knew there, and this is not current information, but I think what I reported at the last monthly meeting, there was still some manufacturing operations that did not involve coating operations. So that, I don't know whether those have been completed yet or not, but the coating has ceased and they're still on schedule, as I understand it, for complete removal and decon of the building by the end of this calendar year. So with respect to the POET installation process, as you know, the first POET system went in on December 15th of 2022. And as of the first of this month, there have been 604 POET systems installed. At this time, the company's contractors have been able to install nearly all the POET systems for properties where property owners were responsive to the initial contractor notification letters. Their contractors notified properties listed under the term sheet attachments 11 through 19, and they provided second notices on the 2nd of April this month to previously non-responsive properties that are eligible for POET systems. In the wake of that, just in the last week or so, we received several calls from residents following the second notice, so that's good news. So we're getting some, that mailing elicited some response, and we're getting some additional inquiries about that. The contractors have begun the periodic maintenance on the POET systems that they've already installed in accordance with the system maintenance work plan that we approved. DES anticipates receiving a report in May of this year summarizing the results of the POET system installation effort and the associated system monitoring that they're doing. So I'll look forward to reporting that probably in 2 or 3 months when we've had a chance to, when we received that report and had a chance to review it. As far as the POET system rebate program that St. Gobain implemented for folks who are within the consent decree who elected to put in their own POET systems prior to St. Gobain beginning their POET installations. They've indicated to us that they received approximately 30 reimbursement requests for that that have been reviewed for eligibility and reimbursement. They notified residents of their eligibility status in February of this year, and the letters provided directions on how to set up the process to be issued payments by the company. And St. Gobain has indicated that several residents have started the vendor payment process, and payments should start being issued this month. DES continues to receive inquiries for that program, and we forward those along to St. Gobain as we receive them. The company is proceeding with design and construction work for water line installations for the towns of Litchfield, Bedford, and Merrimack. These are areas, as you all know, where existing water lines, where the homes require a connection to the water main in the street, but also areas where water line needs to be extended to that particular location first. And a notice to proceed for construction was granted in October by the company for the Hillcrest Road water main extension area of Litchfield. And the water main and curb stop installations have now been completed on Rocky Hill Road, Shirley Way, Muscovy Drive, and Hillcrest Road. And as of the end of last month, March 26th, approximately 3,900 feet of 8-inch water main, 6,200 feet of 12-inch water main, and 125 feet of 14-inch water main have been installed. The contractors have been working on non-town roads due to the winter moratorium and the road closures that happen each spring as a result of frost coming out of the ground, and resumed work on town roads earlier this month when that ban was lifted. The water utility began exterior tasks for water service connections and anticipates that water meter installations will begin on April 10th, so that presumably happened this week, starting at properties where the water main was completed in 2023 and the service applications have been received. The utility contractor anticipates that water services will be activated for some properties this month. The contractors have estimated that this work will take approximately 6 months to complete, and the utility has received 56 responses from 78 properties that were contacted. 16 of these responses indicate that they would decline the service connection, with 7 properties electing to have a line extended from the curb stop to the house, but not to connect within the house. DES notified the non-responsive residents on March 18th of 2024, and the water utility received responses from several locations that were previously identified as non-responsive. So again, that second reach out seemed to bear some fruit, so we're glad to see that. Saint-Gobain has been working with the utility company to complete the design for service connections to existing water mains in the towns of Bedford and Londonderry. Bids have been received for this work, and the water utility has selected and awarded the work to a contractor. The utility is awaiting the contractor's schedule and anticipates that service applications will be sent to eligible properties in June of this year. Saint-Gobain's consultant has finalized design packages for extensions and connections to existing water mains for the Merrimack, Wildcat, Brenda Lane service connections. The bid process was closed in December. The company has selected a contractor and awarded the work. It's likely that that work will be starting in the spring of this year, so soon. And these projects are estimated to take approximately 3 to 4 months and be completed by the fall of this year. The company is working with the water utility in the town of Londonderry to evaluate the feasibility of water line extensions there. And the town has applied for supplemental funding to assist in the long-term expansion of municipal water in the town. So the town of Londonderry is looking for its own, contributions to extending and expanding the water system construction in there beyond what Saint-Gobain might do. And they are communicating and negotiating with Saint-Gobain about how to make that happen. So that work is, and those discussions are still in progress. On April 6th, DES received a letter from Saint-Gobain that proposed to delay submittal of an application for groundwater management permit until completion of a second set of PFAS samples from all drinking water wells at the site. DES concurred that a confirmation sample from all wells would assist in delineating the boundary of the groundwater management zone and developing the long-term monitoring plan that's required under the permit. So DES has issued an approval letter back in May of 23, which requested the application for groundwater management permit be submitted by this May. But we anticipate that we'll be having a meeting with them to talk about what an extension looks like. So that I think what that means is we won't see a groundwater management permit application in May, but we'll end up with a new due date, which we'll share with you, and that will hopefully give us a better application that's more fully informed by the sampling that they're completing. So we've also periodically been receiving updated proposals from the company to remedy additional water supply wells within the CD area following the initial agreements in April and June of 22. This includes term sheet attachment 19, which is just a handful of additional properties, and there'll be a link to that in the notes or in the minutes. We received that in March of this year and reviewed it, and the attachment includes an updated list of remedies for all properties since the April 22 proposal. So it's kind of a comprehensive listing of the remedies. that have been decided on so far. And we anticipate that we will receive a new proposal with additional properties from the company in May of this year. With regard to water supply sampling, as this group certainly knows, the company presented a work plan for residential well sampling along with 18 addenda to the sampling plan. And we approved the sampling outlined in addendum 18 back in January. And Saint-Gobain's consultant has been retesting wells with PFOA results between 10 and 12 parts per trillion and sampling additional wells within the consent decree area. Results from the initial resampling effort targeting homes between 10 and 12 have indicated that 30% of the homes tested increased, 29% decreased, and 41% remained approximately the same. The consultant started the effort to collect a second set of samples from all wells previously sampled only once that exhibited results from below the detection limit to 10 nanograms per liter. And as of March, as the end of last month, March 25th, second samples have been collected from approximately 1,138 properties, which represents approximately 95% of the targeted properties for resampling by the company. So they're getting close. Lab analytical results for the second samples from the properties that exhibited results between detection and 10 parts per trillion have indicated that between 5 and 10% of the resampled properties have exhibited exceedances of a drinking water standard. So these properties have been issued bottled water eligibility letters. Moving to previously unsampled wells within the CD area. As we've discussed here, DES has consistently expressed a need for additional sampling addendum to complete sampling of all water supply wells within the CD area. In a letter dated June of last year, we required the company to complete sampling of all water supply wells located within the outer boundary of the consent decree. Saint-Gobain does not agree to conduct that sampling. We met with them and their representatives back in August and again in December on the subject, and the outcome of those meetings was that SG, the Saint-Gobain, would not agree to deviate from their current approach. We essentially are proceeding with completing sampling at the remaining homes within the outer boundary of the consent decree that the company has not yet offered to sample. That sampling effort was initiated at the end of last month, March, we initiated that by notifying the first batch of residents in Bedford and Merrimack, and sampling of those water supplies is now scheduled to start on April 17th. A second batch of letters for the remaining towns will be sent out after the sampling is underway, and we anticipate that it will take approximately 2 to 3 months to complete the effort. And we've made it clear to the company that we intend to recover costs for this allocation of resources to complete the work. And then regarding, we've had some discussions regarding previously unresponsive properties. So we provided notifications via letter on April 2nd this year to approximately 900 property owners that had previously not been responsive to the company's request to conduct sampling of their water supply wells. These were properties previously identified for sampling, but that had not responded to the initial letters or had not returned access agreements. The DES letters notified property owners of their eligibility to be sampled and requested that they contact the company's consultant to have the sampling completed. We've received significant response, about 40 calls from property owners based on this mailing. So again, those efforts to go back to folks who have not been responsive are bearing fruit, and we're pleased to see that. As of March 25th, and this reflects the most recently updated addendum 18. Here are the statistics for the sampling that's been conducted. 3,867 properties have been identified for sampling. That's not a change. 3,855 access agreements have been sent with a return rate of about 70%, and there's no change from last month's report on that. 2,478 samples were collected from water supply wells, and that's 2 more than the February report. And 1,138 second samples have been collected from water supply wells. And that's the resampling that I referred to earlier. That includes 967 samples collected since June of 23. And then 1,123 properties have been offered bottled water, and that is not a change. And lastly, with respect to the plant site investigation, as this group certainly knows, remedial action plan was submitted back in May. We met with the company and their consultant in June, and they decided to submit a RAP addendum following those discussions. We met with them and their representatives in December of 23 to discuss the results and the contents of that RAP addendum, which was submitted February 9th. And we are reviewing that RAP addendum and will be providing comment as appropriate. And then the rest of when I provide these notes to the clerk, we'll have appended to it the usual bar charts and pie charts that show the progress. But to summarize it in prose, the POET implementation is on the order of 78.5% total across all the towns. In other words, of the ones identified for installation, about 78% have been installed. And again, this means the remedy is complete. So there are actually more POETs that have been installed than that, but we don't call it implemented until we get a significant round of samples to demonstrate that it's working properly. So there's a lag there between the number that they've actually installed and the number that are considered complete. The numbers individually for Merrimack are about 56%. Londonderry is about 89%. Litchfield about 83%. Hudson 75%, and Bedford 74%. And then so you'll see those graphics in the notes. And with that, happy to take any questions.
Leanne. Not Leanne, I'm sorry. Lorraine.
Lorene, don't confuse me. And just so you know, Chris, I'm going to hop off early. I have to be at the cardiologist, so I'm watching the time. 4 questions, Mike, that are brief and probably quick answered. So I'll just ask like one at a time and you can answer them. That would probably be the quickest way, right? One is, do you have a contact person? We have residents one on Wire Road and one in Pearson who told us this week that they haven't been able to get an answer from the DES representation over what the time frame is for having their POETs installed, and it's been quite a while on bottled water. So any idea of where I could direct them?
Well, they should start with Andy Fuller. I don't know if that's who they're already talking to, but and it may be that Andy can't tell them what the answer is because he doesn't know. But they should start with Andy, and then I'm sure that if these are folks who've been offered POETs by St. Gobain, then at the end of the day, that their contractor and their consultant and the company are going to be the ones that can tell them when that's likely to happen.
I'm not really sure, and you may or may not know this from the map, if Wire Road or Pearson Road, could they potentially be in an area of dispute, even though they're receiving bottled water?
Wire Road rings a bell for me from a long time ago. We're starting to get.
Yes, me too.
I knew about Wire Road back in 2016.
I didn't say it to him because I wasn't sure. So, okay, follow up with Andy.
Yeah, have him start with Andy, and then I'll give Andy a heads up and let him know he might hear from somebody, right. And we'll try to do the best we can to get him an answer.
That's number one. Number two is as far as the cleanup plan, I've read the May one and the February one, and some other folks may have also. I know Dawn did. We talked about it. We don't really see much difference between what their proposal is. It's inadequate. So my comment there is there a way, there was some bill floating through, Maureen will know where it is, and Nancy and everybody, that talked about, the best interests of community being considered. Sounded grand, but what does that really mean? To me, I would like it if there was an opportunity for the public to submit comments, not just emotional comments, but comments on that plan at any point in this process. Is that at all possible? Because it does impact us.
Well, you're right. We are, that RAP addendum is not substantially different than the original one that was submitted last year, and we were underwhelmed still by that. So we are working on a detailed comment letter on that, which we will provide. And I think that this story has not been told yet, so to speak, right? So I think that I understand your question, and I think maybe the best course of action right now is to look with interest, as I'm sure you will, at our comments on that. And then I think if there's a desire to have some kind of public input on that, then certainly that's something we could entertain.
We appreciate that. The other two questions are a little loaded. One is, do you have it in your authority to request that Saint-Gobain provide bottled water to those private wells that we know test between 4 parts and 12 parts per trillion? Because we all know this was coming.
Right. So, well, that's a great question. We do anything, right? But if where the rubber meets the road, not clear we would have an ability to compel them. I think that I do want to be clear. Once we have an MCL and an ambient groundwater quality standard that is at 4, then they will be, under the terms of the consent decree, they'll be responsible to provide alternate water solutions for folks who exceed that standard. But until it is actually the standard, not clear that, you know, that they would be, that the consent decree doesn't require them to do that. So that's something that I think we want to have some communications with the company about, and go from there. But I guess that's the best way I can answer the question.
Please, maybe, you know, for what it's worth, express to them on behalf of communities, the consensus is, you know, we know the data is there, we know the testing is there, and it's sad, it's shameful. You know, we've been 8 years into this investigation. People have been on bottled water for, some people I know, 5 years on bottled water. And the people who are sitting between 4 and 12, that's the latest chapter, you know, as those numbers came down from 70, you know, when people are told, do I have to worry about this or don't I? It's just, at the end of the day, we're the PFAS Health Commission, you know, it's about the health. And I really would love it if they would just acknowledge that. They're going to have to do it anyways. You know, it seems really wrong to leave those folks in limbo and abandoned and invisible. So that's it for me. And then I assume when you adopt the MCLs, they will immediately be put on the remediation list, not just the bottled water list, right? Those folks.
Oh, right. Once there's an AGQS that is equal to 4, the full terms of the consent decree would apply to that party with respect to both bottled water and a permanent water solution.
And aside for DES, Saint-Gobain's dime, DES, I know, must have an idea in general, you know, what it's going to cost for the rest of the state. Ideally, the grant program gets replenished and, you know, whatever you have to do for water utilities. If you know that rough number, have you communicated that as of yet specifically? Is it asked to the federal delegation? Because I'm sure they would be responsive to it.
I'm sorry, which number?
What, you have an idea of what it would cost, you know, remember back with the MCLs, you were looking at what would it cost to get the whole state in compliance for water utilities. So you must have some idea of what it would cost for water utilities to comply with 4. So that's one pot of money. The other one is the grant program for wells that exceed it. That is phenomenal. Other states are looking at modeling that. So my question was, if you have an idea of that money, or maybe you're in the works and you can do it, have you been able to go to the federal delegation and specifically say, this is what we need? Because you know what's coming in those various infrastructure pockets. But I'm reading that, you know, Commissioner Scott has clearly said, hey, there's a shortage. So has the ask been made and given them specific numbers? Because they are fabulous. I know they can deliver.
Yeah, so with respect to the impacts on public water systems, we know we have, I mean, we're probably ahead of any state in the union when it comes to understanding what the quality of water is in our public water systems. We've been, you know, looking to them to sample since 2016 and really getting a lot of data. So Brandon Kernan, you know, Brandon knows exactly how many water systems won't comply with the new standard, or not won't comply, but will have supply wells that include supply wells that are over the standard. I don't know, it's a little more difficult to get a hard number on what that costs because each water system is going to have different options available to it to address that, right? Some of them will be able to blend water because they have more than one source. Some of them will have to go to carbon. Others may elect to say, you know, and this is something we're working on. We're looking at a study to see, you know, how many of these smaller community water systems would actually benefit from, you know, extension of another larger water system and consolidation with other systems so that wells that exceed can be taken offline and water sources that can meet the standard will provide those systems. So it's complicated, and the water division is probably in a better place certainly than I am to put a number on that. As far as communications with our delegation, we certainly communicate with them frequently, and I know the commissioner's been in communication with them, and we have made it clear both publicly and to them that, you know, we appreciate the resources that EPA has been sending our way, but they're nowhere near adequate to address this, not even close. And also understand that it was a little misleading when EPA, you know, 2 days ago, or well, I guess because it was a week ago now. I'm losing track of time when it was. But when they announced this, and yeah, and again, it was 2 days ago. When they announced this, they announced new money. They made it sound like there was new money being allocated. That money, that $9-something million, we already knew about that money. We knew that money was coming to the agency through existing bill programs. It's been amended a little bit to, you know, EPA has encouraged us to use it for PFAS, which we plan to do anyways, but it has extended for at least for 2024 the ability to use that money for not just public water systems but private wells. But it is not new money, to be clear, and I don't want to seem ingrateful to our federal partners, but it's not as though they had an extra $1 billion or $10 billion laying around and they said, oh, we're announcing these rules today, let's throw that extra money at it. That's not what happened. That money had already been allocated and advertised to the states, so it is not new money.
So the settlement, the national settlement on behalf of water utilities and water operators with the first one came in and was, you know, whatever they did, finalized, whatever they call it, certified, I think about 2 weeks ago. We heard the attorney speak at NMOA about that. I don't know if you were there, but I was there and I talked with him afterwards. So there's a huge pot of money that water utilities could directly go. The 3M one is set, you know, there's various other ones coming in, and based on tests and the formula that they have, they really do sit, given the data we have in New Hampshire, to get the money from that, and it looks wonderful. But I heard through the grapevine that the Attorney General in New Hampshire has told them they can't join that suit. So, you know, I don't know what that's about. There's a huge pot of money out there that could go directly to water utilities, and we could cut through a lot of bureaucratic red tape, and we could have polluter accountability and get money from people who made this.
And I don't want to say too much about that because I'm not an attorney and we're talking about.
Okay, I just want to put that out there for people
What
to
a
think.
suit's going to do. What I will say is that
I have to go so I don't get fired by my cardiologist. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Hey guys,
Larry.
Chris, I actually have to go also. I don't know if somebody could take over minutes potentially for the last 30 minutes or so. Then we can combine our notes.
Okay.
I did have one quick question for you, Mike, following up on, I think, some of Maureen's and everybody's obvious concerns. And this may be a stupid question, but I mean, would it make sense to, you know, and I assume we are going to ask, you know, the company, you know, are you willing to remediate and start remediating now, you know, for wells that will inevitably be over limit, you know, once the 3-year testing window, you know, in 2 years for your required compliance pass, just to get an answer on record from them, because it would make sense, but I anticipate their answer would be no, we're not going to be compliant until we are forced or compelled to be compliant, you know?
Yeah, well, in the broad sense, certainly over the last 8 years, we've asked them to do a number of things that they weren't necessarily, we weren't necessarily in position to compel them to do. Some of those things, to their credit, they have done. Some of them they declined to do. But I want to make clear the way that the consent decree is constructed. What drives what they're required to do under it is where our ambient groundwater quality standard is set. And of course, under state law, the MCL, a federal MCL, you know, is likely going to get adopted as a state MCL, but also the AGQS comes in line with that. So the real function here is when we have an ambient groundwater quality standard that is set at 4, for example, and when that happens, then provisions of the consent decree would be enforceable. if you will.
Understood.
But yes, it's certainly, we're not shy about asking them to move more quickly or do additional things, particularly if they're things that we anticipate they are going to be in a position to be required to do in the future.
And I guess that's my other question is, and I know you can't speak for, all, DES, frankly, even, or, the government, at the state level, but do you think there will be any intent to change that ambient groundwater standard, prior to the federal MCL changing?
This decision is 2 days old and we're still wrapping our heads around it. I'm not in a position to comment on.
I completely understand. Wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask. Thank you, Mike.
Fair question.
Take care, guys.
Rosemary, thanks, Mike.
Oh, thank you. Mike, you mentioned that Saint-Gobain's asked for a extension on submitting the groundwater management plan. Where are we talking weeks, months? They're just awaiting more sample tests, right?
Right. I don't know if yet, because we haven't had that meeting to discuss it. My guess is it'll be a few months. But I'll be really candid with you. That doesn't trouble me that much, because it's going to be a lot more important to get this right. This is, this groundwater management permit is going to be unlike any other groundwater management permit we have ever issued or administered. And it's complex, and there are a lot of issues to resolve. And if we've learned anything over the years, the more you know about the groundwater and drinking water in the study area, the better you are that we're going to do a better job at it. So, we were supportive of that because we want to have that data at our fingertips before we start, evaluating what their plan looks like.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Andy, go ahead.
Thanks, Mike. Can you tell us how many were in the first batch of letters that were sent, and then how many are in the next batches that were sent out for sampling? That DES is sampling because Saint-Gobain won't do it?
Oh, I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, but my understanding is the number is on the order of around 200 properties total. So that's I think where we're going to be.
In the first batch or all the batches?
I think the whole group is between 200 and 300, but I have to double check. I'm not entirely sure.
Can you put that in your notes too, if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah.
And then how many are, I've asked you this before, how many now are above 4 that are within the CD area that were previously below the standard?
Yeah, we think that's a great question. We think that number is around 1,200 properties that are between 4 and 12.
Okay, and my last question is, so I think it's my last question. No, there's 2 questions. So in the interim, I've asked this before, can DES send out a letter to those people who are between 4 and the old standard, identifying that, MCLs have been passed into law and this is what EPA thinks, and, just to put them on notice that they're drinking water that is no longer considered safe by EPA? And then the second part of that question was, I'm a little confused. So I wasn't aware that the state of New Hampshire's MCLs could be less stringent than the EPA's. So can you also walk us through how that process is, and then what's the process for the state to come in compliance with the EPA levels?
Yeah, my understanding, this is essentially our drinking water program and their laws and rules that govern this. So I'm not the expert on that. But my understanding is that the state MCL is to be aligned with the federal MCL.
So automatically it should go into effect then?
Well, that's not what I said. That they're to be aligned. When it actually happens in time, that is what I don't know. That's something that our water division would know.
Can we get an answer from, or maybe Chris, if you want to ask for someone to come speak to that to us next time, that would be great, or whoever needs to answer that question. Because I'm not under, I believe, from stuff that we've done in the past on this, when it says no less stringent than the EPA MCLs. Yeah, no less stringent than the federal levels. So I don't understand how there could be an interim period. And then secondly, so you had said something just a minute ago about, in answer to Mike's question about the CD being in effect after the the ambient groundwater quality standards went into effect, but not the MCLs. And I don't understand that because so the MCLs apply to the public drinking water systems, which Don is familiar, you know. So those are going into effect right away. And then why is it because are you talking about the private drinking water wells?
Yeah, I
What's the
understand that our program, you know, uses authority under 147B and 485C to that guided the content of the CD. And that makes reference to ambient groundwater quality standard. And in many respects, it's more powerful, right? Because the state MCLs only apply to regulated public drinking water systems. Ambient groundwater quality standards apply to all groundwater in the state. So when we're dealing with a contaminated site, we use ambient groundwater quality standards to effectuate our work. And in fact, if you look at the list of ambient groundwater quality standards, there are far more compounds that have AGQS associated with them than there are that have state or federal MCLs associated with them. So we are looking at a much broader suite of contaminants that we regulate and for which we can require the owner of a contaminated site to do remediation, or in the event that they've impacted someone's drinking water, to implement, you know, there are, for example, there are sites where we have a contaminant of interest that doesn't even have an MCL, but we've got responsible parties providing alternate water to people whose wells they've contaminated with that contaminant because it exceeds the ambient groundwater quality standard. Now, the ambient groundwater quality standard is likely to be changed contemporaneously with the MCL. That'll probably happen at the same time. So in some respects, maybe it doesn't really make that much difference, but I point it out because people tend to just treat them as though they are the exact same thing, and they're not. They're standards that emanate from separate state statutes.
Gary.
So can you lay out the process for us? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the answer to what I was asking, for how that's going to happen. It seems very innocuous. I don't hear.
I'm telling you, your reason you're not clear is that I don't know, because the EPA has not set a new federal MCL since 1994. So I'm just not exactly sure. And as again, this is a 48-hour decision, 48 hours old. So we're looking at that and trying to figure out what that's going to look like.
Yeah, so I guess I'd like to hear from someone next meeting about that if we don't hear from it before.
Mike, you and I can.
Sure, yeah, no, we'd be happy to, you know, and maybe have Brandon or someone like that come in and talk about what that's going to look like, and maybe by then we'll even know. So.
Okay. Mindy, I'm sorry I cut you off. Did you get all of your questions answered? Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Gary.
You're muted, Gary.
Again, referring back to the EPA rulings and to Mindy's question, I vaguely, and I was looking in my folder, I can't seem to find it, but I thought I saw someplace that there was a surprisingly long time frame for the compliance part. Was something on the order of a year or two, and I thought, wow.
Yeah, no, sure. No, you're absolutely right. So understand, these are, you know, the impact of a federal drinking water MCL is huge, right? And you have water systems that, so the way that, and I'm not defending it or criticizing it, it's just what it is. The way that I understand it typically works is that when a new MCL is promulgated, water systems have 3 years, or states have 3 years to implement the standard. And then water systems, once the standard is implemented, water systems have essentially a period of time to determine whether they have that contaminant in their water system. We're way ahead on that because all our water systems know whether yet or not. And then they have 12 quarters during which, or excuse me, 4 quarters or 12 months during which to demonstrate that they either do or don't meet compliance. So they have basically 4 quarters of quarterly sampling. And then if they don't meet compliance, then they have a year to come into compliance and basically get treatment on so that the water they're delivering meets standards. That's why people are talking about a 5-year implementation period here. Now, obviously, that's not a comfort or doesn't feel very good to people who are drinking the water, right? That's what the regulatory system, that's how the regulatory system is structured.
Right.
And that's something that Brandon is much more expert on than I am. So if he comes to talk to you, it's something that he could explain. But, you know, that what that really means, I mean, obviously we have water systems that have already, you know, been above our state MCL and state ambient groundwater quality standard, and they've already taken steps. And, you know, we just heard Don Preventer talk about how they're, you know, they've been providing water that meets not only our standard, but the new proposed standard for several years now. So we are lucky in the sense that we're very far ahead in many respects. But for those water systems that are below 12, that have not seen a need to treat or do anything different, they're going to need to be working to develop, you know, a plan to come into compliance.
I don't see any more questions for Mike, and so we'll move on to Leanne. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I have a couple of updates to share. The first is about the Merrimack cancer investigation, the feasibility study. So Dartmouth and DHHS identified partner members for the project steering committee, scientific advisory board, and community advisory board, which will provide input on the project. Invitations for participation were circulated and membership confirmed, and kickoff meetings for the boards and committee have been scheduled. If you have any additional suggestions about members, you can provide them to me. I know in particularly for the community advisory board, you know, they were looking to see if there was any additional interest from the community for participation. So in advance of the board and committee kickoff meetings, the Dartmouth team continues working on the project study design, a data analysis plan, community engagement studios, and ways to engage the community and participants. The team is working to develop an online interest form and questionnaire to identify community members who may be interested in being involved in the community engagement studios and to solicit community feedback. And in support of all of these efforts, Dartmouth has hired a research study coordinator to help with the work on the project, and that coordinator will be starting in mid-April. So I think hopefully sometime in the next week or so. So that's what I have on the feasibility study. In regards to the PFAS MCLs, I just want to give an update on bottled water. So bottled water is regulated by the Food Protection Section at HHS. In 2021, the bottled water rules were updated so that all bottled water sold in the state of New Hampshire must meet the DES drinking water MCLs. So both in-state and out-of-state bottled water producers that offer water for sale in New Hampshire have to submit test results annually to HHS to demonstrate compliance with the drinking water standards for PFOA, PFOS, PFHXS, and PFNA. So based on the current results that we have, all producers are complying with those current drinking water quality standards, and they're already meeting the new EPA standards for those same compounds for PFOA, PFOS, PFHXS, and PFNA. We're working to gather data from the bottled water producers for the 2 remaining compounds for Gen X and PFBS, because those compounds weren't ones that were required to be submitted. We do have a lot of data. Most of the producers, I think there's only 2 that haven't submitted data for those compounds already. But based on what we have for those producers that have voluntarily shared the test results for those compounds, their products are meeting the new EPA standards for Gen X and the hazard index for PFAS mixtures. So the department will continue to work closely with producers and state and federal partners to ensure that bottled water offered in New Hampshire continues to meet all federal and state water quality requirements. The next update is something that we've talked about before. We've been working on updating our New Hampshire specific guidance for clinicians. We've been working with Dartmouth on that effort to update the changes that ATSDR made to their guidance in January 2024, and also now to incorporate a reference to the new MCLs from EPA. And that's all I have. If anyone has any questions.
Everyone all set? Looks good. Thank you, Leanne. And Maureen, can you update us on what's happening at the legislature?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members. I'll make this brief. It's been a very big week. I have 5 bills I would like to highlight, and I'll go through them relatively swiftly. The first is from our 2023 PFAS bill tracking chart. Incidentally, both charts to 2023 and 2024 have been updated as of this morning. So the first bill is House Bill 398. Its status now is that it had a hearing in the Senate Commerce Committee on April 2nd. That bill is related to disclosing for the sale of real property PFAS. Okay, moving to the 2024 chart. House Bill 1649. That is relative to prohibiting PFAS in certain products. After a lengthy debate in yesterday's House session, it passed through the House with a vote of 233 to 140. I would go so far as to say that was a blowout victory. So that was yesterday, and now it's on to the Senate. More to come on that. Okay, House Bill 1613. That is a trust fund for settlements. That had a Senate hearing on April 10th. So that is moving through the process. Next bill, House Bill 1171. That is extending this commission. Representative Murphy, I believe prime sponsor. So that bill went through Senate Health and Human Services and came out as an ought to pass recommendation 5-0 on April 18th. And then lastly is Senate Bill 413. That came out of the Senate Judiciary ought to pass, excuse me, it came out of the whole Senate, ought to pass with amendment. And that is now headed to the House and has already been referred to the House Judiciary Committee. Now, there was some discussion about the amendment that the Senate tacked on to that bill. I don't know if we want to have that or any discussion about that now or perhaps later, but that's going to conclude my report on the updates on those 5 bills that are very much alive stemming from this commission. So thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission.
Thank you. Are there questions, Don?
Yeah, I just had one quick question, and I did email Mike separately yesterday to ask a question. The amendment, part of the amendment that Maureen is talking about is that the threshold level for the bill to apply to contaminated sites, PFAS contaminated sites, from what I understand, it was originally set at 100 and it ended up passing at 10,000 parts per trillion. So I guess my question is, how many sites are there in New Hampshire that are with groundwater at 10,000 parts per trillion? Like, and then I think there was discussion of that limit being 1,000. Went from 100, there was discussion of 1,000, and it ended up at 10,000. So the higher it goes, the fewer sites are applicable. So I don't know if you have an answer now, Mike, but if you can look into that, I'm just curious. At 10,000, how many sites would it apply to that we know of today? And how many more sites would there be at 1,000? It just seems like it would be, if it's 10,000 and there aren't many sites that would apply to, the utility of the bill is diminished significantly there.
Yeah, you could say, yeah, so the number of sites is actually very small. The number of sites above 10,000 is about 4. But that does include everyone's favorite site here, St. Gobain, for example. So, you know, our understanding was that the senator's primary goal in advancing this legislation was to provide for the people whose wells were believed to be impacted by St. Gobain's emissions, but who are outside the consent decree area, that they would have a firmer footing if they wanted to take an action to try to get an alternate water solution from the company. And this bill, as it's currently amended, would do that. It would give them this private right of action. So it certainly does not apply to as many sites as it would have at 100. There were a huge outcry from the business community, from insurance companies, from a whole host of other stakeholders that I think was going to imperil the bill for sure. And so, you know, when you're doing something like this, the senator felt that it was worthwhile to you know, change in order to get the bill passed, as I don't want to speak for her, but to achieve her primary goal, which I think this bill would do.
Okay. Any more questions on legislation? I'll just say that it.
Well, just
Go
if I
ahead.
could add, with regards to that amendment, I have placed a link to that amendment that was adopted in the chart, the tracking chart. I can also send it around separately if you wanted, but there were 2 amendments that were discussed, but to me, they look identical. They have different numbers, and one is sponsored by Senator Ricciardi, but the other one says Judiciary Committee. So anyhow, the amendment that was adopted, the number that was adopted that is coming to the House, I have placed a link in the chart. Thank you.
Rosemarie, did you have?
I just wanted to make a comment that Representative Mooney did an exceptional job yesterday with a parliamentary inquiry, which is essentially sort of a speech, and to really encourage that really healthy majority vote on 1649. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you very much, Representative. Team effort, that's for sure.
Teamwork is dream work.
Well, it's coming in our 5th year. It's been a good session, let's say that. So other than that, I think we're at our, oh, go ahead, Nancy.
The only other thing I'd mention in terms of legislation is I don't have a date yet, but the extension of this commission will be heard by the Senate too. And I'm hoping that maybe we can send a letter from the commission saying that we still have a lot of work to be done. I would imagine that there would still be great support for this commission, you know, bipartisan support in the Senate as well. But I think it makes sense for us to, as a commission, to recommend and support that bill when it comes before the Senate, so we can come back and continue to do the work we're doing. So we got the environmentally triggered chronic illness commission. You know, we're in a good place with that in the Senate, but I think this one will be coming up soon, and I just want to be sure it's on everybody's radar, and you know, anybody that can testify, and that maybe, you know, just as the group, the commission itself, we reach out to the committee and support that.
Okay, and it may have already been said, but is that in front of a committee, or is that just going to go to the full Senate?
It'll go to committee first. Yeah, I don't
what-
have a date yet, and I actually have to look up the number, what it is, what the new number is. But I mean, I'll send you a note as soon as I hear Chris.
Okay,
But I just wanted to be on people's radar that should be coming up fairly soon, and that if we had, you know, something ready to go from the commission itself, that would be helpful.
okay. Anything else that people would like to add at this point? If not, I did make the rounds again to see about if there would be a better time than 2 p.m. on Friday, but this seems to be the least inconvenient time for people. So our next meeting will be May 10th of 2024. And go ahead, Rosemary.
Yeah, I just want to bring attention to the fact that we should probably work on recruiting members to be added to the commission so that we're at a full roster, particularly as we see, particularly as we see a lot of work going on in Londonderry and Hudson, to be able to make sure those communities are represented. And Representative Dunn, I know you're with Londonderry, but it would be good if you know of anyone who would have an interest in contributing to the commission, if they could, that could be, an invitation could be extended.
I do. I just don't know how to remove my other person.
I think all you have to do is, if they could just submit an email to the chairman saying they've resigned their position. And
that's
it depends what role they're in. I believe your role is as the state representative, but
I'm actually listed as the citizen. I'm the citizen representative because Tom Dolan is the representative.
Yeah, I think that would probably, I should have mentioned it when I had a conversation with him yesterday, but it would be good to realign that commission roster. I know Representative Mooney had done some work on that about a year ago, and it'd be good to kind of move that forward and get some of those people from those communities on it. I know with your bill, well, I'm on it too, Nancy, about extending this commission. I did introduce the bill extending Senate Bill 85, and but I know that the bill to extend this commission had an amendment to add Hudson, and that came from Representative Andy Ronzullo. But it would be good to start having those conversations in place, and I'll actually talk to him and see if he has anyone in mind, so that we can kind of hit the ground running once that bill goes into statute. But as far as the other members, we'll just do a new roster, fill it in. If some people have to resign, like your role, and be assigned another role, we can easily do that. The only thing for you to step into that state rep or the town, let me see, because we're supposed to have, I think, 5 state reps. We have to figure it out. Maybe, Mr. Chairman, if it might be good to set up a subcommittee, a nominating committee to straighten out the roster. And I'd be happy to volunteer for that, since it's my suggestion, and perhaps maybe work with Representative Dunn. If anybody else wants to join, and we could make a proposal for a commission roster.
Okay,
Yeah, I do want to participate in that.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it does take some action from House and Senate leadership.
Right, and we could reach out to them to make appointments. I believe the way the statute is that the majority leader or minority leader, maybe not, they make a nomination, and then the speaker, how does it go, Nancy? Somebody makes a nomination, the speaker confirms it for the House representative, but then the Senate representative is nominated and confirmed by the president.
President of the Senate. And I mean, we've worked out before. We worked out on the SB 85 commission as well. I don't think we can really do anything until the next bill passes, but I think it's good to do some groundwork, assuming that we need representation from Hudson and everything. So if we just figure out right now, I think, who's serving in what role, like Ron, what role he's serving in, then we'll know what's missing, and and then we can sort of reallocate and ask, submitting names of people that might be actually helpful and willing to serve.
In the short term, if Tom wanted to resign from the committee, would he send the letter to Chris, or would he send it to Sherman?
I maybe send it to both. I think he actually,
It has to go
I
through
think
the-
he resigned. I think
Because
he
I can talk
actually,
to Tom. He hasn't been at any
Yeah.
meeting. I don't know why he would want to stay on. If he can resign, then
I think he resigned actually to the chair, and then the chair notifies the speaker of that there's a vacancy.
He could CC. He could CC the speaker. That's
okay.
Yeah.
what I would suggest. That
I'll
way
talk to Tom this weekend and see how he feels.
Okay, sounds good.
Maureen?
Yes, I would like to serve on that also. As was mentioned, I
Good.
do have that chart. It was probably about a year ago. Right after this meeting, I'll share it with Representatives Rung and Dunn. And hopefully that'll at least be a starting point to straightening this out. I'm eager to do that as well.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Right. If anybody else who's still here would like to be on that committee, let me know, but I'll just reach out to other people. But 3 seems like a workable number, so I'll leave it to you guys to organize me. All right.
This is Rich Lascelles. You can put me down.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Rich. Okay. So next meeting, May 10th, 2 p.m. Anything further? If not, it is 3:56 and long meeting. Thank you for all for bearing with it. Take a motion to adjourn by Mike Wimsat. Is there a second?
Can I ask a question before we, who is the clerk today?
The clerk was Michael Strand, but I'm taking over.
Okay. I will send my notes to both you and to Michael.
That will work. Thank you. All right. So were you moving to adjourn, Michael?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. And seconded by Ron. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Amy Russo.